Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryankaravavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Chapter 6 has started out by answering the question, and it's continuing to answer the question, who is that one that is an ideal candidate for meditation? We haven't answered what meditation even means yet. We're answering who is that one who is living the right kind of life, who is a perfect or a perfected yogi, a karma yogi, one who is dedicated to the truth, one who is committed, the one who does what needs to be done. What do they know? And we saw yesterday that if there is one defining attribute that they understand or by which they carry themselves, is lift yourself up by yourself. Uplift yourself by yourself. And this is a wonderful verse because it says that Lord Krishna says, hey, I gave you this body, I gave you this mind, and you alone have the capacity to truly uplift it for yourself. It's not others' responsibility to uplift you. It is your responsibility to uplift yourself. And this is a big step of maturity in one's journey. It's no longer about the world needs to make me happy. People need to kind of satisfy my fancies. The environment needs to change. Less of that manipulating the world, manipulating the environment, manipulating others, all for the sake of satisfying either of those two conditions. Things always have to be my way, or they have to be more than I expected. And yet we got two more. Things can be less than I expected, and things can be opposite to what I expected. And these four are really the essence of what an equanimous mind is, samatvam, the one who enjoys equanimity anywhere, at the airport, going home, on the road, anywhere. These four are the realities. Something can happen totally opposite than you wanted. Someone can die tomorrow that is very close to you. Someone can say, I'm sorry, and you never expected that. And they surprise you. So this is the reality. And what kind of values does this yogi carry? And we started out, in other words, what makes this yogi who is intelligent, who is discerning, what makes them capable of discerning the realities, of discerning the truth? And we started out by saying from, it's actually coming from chapter 13, one of the 20 values. And I'm not going to go through all 20 values. I'm just going to share some. And we mentioned things like lack of conceit. In other words, absence of excessive pride for having attained something, for having gone to some major event, or having some long list of qualifications. And this kind of shuts down the person, because we pick up others when they're coming from this place of some kind of an agenda for you, and you cannot be yourself. And you know what the feeling is like when you're just trying to be yourself, but it's not possible for some reason, and you just want to say, can this person just be my friend? Right? I don't want to play this game of I'm higher, you're lower. I just want to be with you right here, let's talk. And this is the truth. But we also said that in some cultures, there is a certain relationship that it's like that, where someone is in a societal position, and you're in a societal position, And based on the context, maybe at work, there is this whole, right, hierarchy. And so you have to also bring that in. That's also a possibility. And we said that another a feature of this yogi is, we said, adambhitvam. And this is absence of having a facade. So again, I said a facade sometimes is necessary. For example, if you're getting a new job, right? Or you want to talk to someone, you need to compose yourself naturally. You need to kind of put up a certain face to get the job done. But then the mistake comes when we take this face all the time, right? With people that we just meet. And while it has a context in some situations, again, it makes you very isolated because nobody can relate to an individual like that who is carrying an inauthentic facade. In other words, it's kind of like this, are you being yourself? Just come back down to earth. Just be yourself. This kind of thing. And I actually met a friend many years, maybe 15 years ago. We met at a business seminar, and I had a very different life back then. I was into business and I was meeting different people. So we had a different outlook on life. And he was very handsome, this man. He was one of those ladies' men. And I turned on, but he had this facade thing going on a lot. And I turned on the TV and they had this reality show where two strangers meet and they don't know anything about each other. And now this camera is rolling and I gotta see how the conversation's going. This is kind of thing to watch. And he was on that show. He was on TV. And this lady, she was, and he was just kind of like putting this, ladies' man thing, totally facade-ish, right? And she's just saying, "Oh my God, dude, just get back down to earth. Get real, dude." And he's like, "Okay." And then he puts up this mask, And I thought, "Oh my God, this fella is my friend, and this is who he is, and he hasn't changed for the longest time. That's just how he is." So he's got this, and I met him once in Sydney. I was in Melbourne. And he said he's doing a movie, and what movie are you making? It's Buddha. It's called the Buddha movie. And I thought, wow, this guy is really spiritual. And I go over there, and he's indeed trying to make a movie for Buddha, and he's just talking with these people. There's an actress sitting there, and I'm like, wait, I came to meet you personally. And he's surrounding himself with these actresses just to show how, he's this person who's so important and he's going over to the millionaire over there making deals, to get some funding. And I'm just waiting here, stuck with this actress who I have no interest in talking to because I came to see him. And she's, all this basically 2 millimeters of makeup I could see on her face. And we go outside, have a little drink, and another actress comes over, and she turns out to be a porn star. And he's like, we don't need a porn star in a Buddha movie, right? And and he's not even kind of engaging. And she sits down, and he gets up, and he makes another deal over there. Now he leaves me with the porn star. So this guy is just moving left and right, and she just gets up impatient, and she just storms away, and she's angry, and he doesn't understand. What's wrong? It's like what's wrong? And I told him, dude, I felt it, and he's listening to me because we're kind of a little bit of friends, and I never saw him again since then. I mean, I don't know why, but I just kind of couldn't connect with him because he was a good friend. But when I met him, it was like, whoa, I want to talk to a friend. I don't want to talk to a facade. And so, he lost the relationship like that. I didn't mean to, but I want a real person. So it's like this. It was kind of fun, but, what to do. So maybe he's changed. This was over 10 years ago. I wonder. And by the way, the movie for Buddha was not for spiritual. He was promoting a credit union fund where you lend money to people. It's like a bank. So he was somehow tying in Buddha with, the good Buddha who gives money away. So I was trying to tie that in. Yeah, so ahimsa, another one was, see, we all have mirror neurons, and these mirror neurons is that when you feel something, you see someone who's crying or in pain, and you feel that this is a healthy response to the other person. And now the other hand, it's when someone's kind of going through a hard time, and you just don't do anything, and so in other words, you're blocked from doing something. So just to not do anything or to make up some excuse how I shouldn't go over there, even though it is fully in your capacity to do something, that is a version of himsa. And you can kind of get away with it, but what it leaves is some form of guilt. Like, I had the capacity to help, but I didn't. And when you do help, when you come over, you feel good. And that is your Ishwara's response, that you were in line, you were keeping with the laws. So, right, so you have this feedback system, right, when you went off track and then made some story, but you can always come back and then next time try something else. Yeah. Okay. And then we have kshanti. Kshanti is accommodation. See, the truth is, every person you meet will be different from you, vastly different, and sometimes not so different. But that is the truth. Even your spouse and your children, they are different in their own way. And because they came with their own trajectory, they are not meant to follow you at the end of the day, because they have their own path. And same thing with people, right? Let alone children, but people, right, who have certain personality traits which you may not agree with. And if we're strict how it's supposed to be, how a person's supposed to act, what they're supposed to say, if we have these strict standards, then you limit your circle of influence, because person just wants to be themselves. And there is nothing more painful than someone being themselves genuinely, and while they're being themselves, someone's putting you into a box. And you feel that. It's like this vast resistance, and you feel that. And it's just so unpleasant to experience that. So if you're on the receiving end, then you can set some boundaries, and you can walk up and say, hey, I'm feeling this resistance from you. Would you mind telling me, is there something that is on your mind? Because I don't understand. But also likewise, we need to be more accommodative towards other people. So, when we can kind of go into someone's house and there's a cultural shock, the kids are screaming and this is normal for them, and you're like, the kids are so naughty, but for them it's normal. So there's a certain sense of, yeah, I need to understand, everyone has their own thing, their own side of how things are done. So I need to open myself up a little bit to accommodate different personalities in life. And that helps you, because it trains you to be flexible. And that simultaneously trains your brain to be flexible around what you know. Okay? As outside as inside. So kshanti is therefore recognizing that people have their ways. They have their ways. Everyone does. And it is not fair to have this, let me figure them out, let me measure them up, let me now put them inside a box. It's just not fair to do that. You wouldn't want that done onto you. Same thing, nobody wants that done onto them. So we can catch ourselves, wait a minute, in this moment, this face is not someone it's like a face that's triggering me, but at the same time, let me not, it's your chance to not let yourself fall for the boxing mode. Therefore, in this moment, I can bring accommodation. Breath, this is a person. There are many personalities, and it's not kind of realistic to be compatible with all personalities. Therefore, there's some space to accommodate different cultures, different teachers, different people, walks of life. This is a yogi who lives like this, because as long as we're not accommodating in keeping a very small level of what I accept, then everything outside ends up agitating you, makes the mind very disturbed. And then the meditation starts, and then the mind is disturbed, because I don't have accommodation towards my environment. So this is Kshanti. And then Arjavam. Arjavam is straightforwardness. What is straightforwardness? What does straightforwardness sound like? You're straight. They're just straight. You speak what you think, right? So in other words, if I have something in my mind, again, it's easy just to say it, but at the same time, there's some, right, some pleasantness, some priyamvadam. So Arjavam is when a person can trust you because they know that what you said, you follow up. And that, one little kind of disturbance and you don't follow up, that can break the bond, it can break the trust, and it takes time to restore that trust. So Arjavam is being that kind of person who just simply says yes only to things that you genuinely can do. So it takes some time to know what is your capacity of action, because it's easy to say yes, 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 yes to everything, but most of those yeses you actually cannot do because time is very small and your energy is not unlimited. So in other words, one says yes to those few things that you really can do, and you then follow up. And therefore the person can trust you, and this is how trust is built, following up what I say. And then Acharya Upasanam. See, knowledge takes time to transfer. Any knowledge, any teacher, and any student-teacher relationship, that's time, isn't it? Whether it's online, whether it's like this, that's time involvement. And the more time you spend with someone, the more you familiarize yourself with a face, the more you start to trust them. And of course, right, they also show themselves because we're like an open book. So the more we spend time with the teacher, with one teacher or another, the more you are comfortable with what they're saying, and you allow yourself for them to actually transform you. The only reason why I'm doing this is not because I just I'm doing this. It's because I trust my teachers. And I allow myself to be transformed by my teacher now, Nima, because I listened to her for years now, one face. And that face is just talking to me all the time. So it's not just Andre is like this, he can explain. I can explain because I trust my teacher. She's speaking through me. So that took a long, committed relationship. Constantly listening. Okay, so yes, there are many people on YouTube and there are many people to listen to, but the cost of jumping and having many is that nothing quite penetrates you. It all sounds good. Everyone's got good things to say. On the surface, it all sounds good, but nothing really sinks in deeply. So the advantage of that relationship with a teacher is that what they say, it becomes part of your voice. It becomes your own life. And that can only happen by having that continuity relationship with a teacher. Therefore, a yogi is a yogi because they have a teacher. Okay? And a teacher is like a mirror. When you open your mouth, you get a chance to see how clear you are on what you're saying. It is until we open our mouth, we don't know what we really know. It's only when we're asked a question or we're entitled or we say something, while you're saying it, in there you go, wow, I actually don't know what I'm saying. I actually don't know what I'm talking about. So you cannot have this privilege with a dead guru. This is why a dead guru is always idealized, because a dead guru never answers, never looks at you. They're just in your mind, and you idealize them as the perfect guru. Therefore, it's a perfect relationship. But in real life, it's like this. It's like between student and teacher. And that takes years. And it's not romantic either, because I thought I was being treated differently, and everyone else is being treated better than I was. And I was angry for one whole year. But I came back. That was the best thing ever. You see, so it's not romantic. It's not like, it's just a perfect thing. It's literally a relationship. And I don't listen to anyone nowadays anymore. Yeah, I've got Paramarthananda, I've got Dayananda, I've got Chinmayananda, I've got Dvayananda. I've heard so many, and I've trained 2 years with Chinmayananda, 2.5 years. But I only listen to Nima nowadays. Why? Because she speaks to me. She speaks my language. She speaks to Andre. She doesn't speak, all over the place. She brings it down to living. Let me live it. So this is the relationship that a yogi enjoys. And Shaucham is both outer and inner cleanliness. Now, outer cleanliness obviously is important, right? Because if your house is relatively well organized and you got some nice posters or some inspiring colors and pictures, that would definitely make a difference, right? It's just how it is. Sometimes we clean up our house. Why? To clean up our mind. Yeah. And in Australia, there's this big thing where people love to renovate houses, and everyone's just renovating one house after the next. Someone's just renovating where I'm staying 4 months, and it's constantly making noise. The moment they finish, the house right next to them continues renovating for another 4 months. Okay, I've got my headphones. It's okay. I'll noise cancel this. That house finishes. Would you believe it? Next house, another 4 months. Oh, this was it. Okay, there's no way. 3 houses. That house finished. Next house begins. Cause and effect. It's like a chain reaction. So in other words, we do what others are doing. A yogi does what they want to do because they value their time. Therefore, outer cleanliness means having a relatively clean place, but inner cleanliness means that everyone carries some bitterness towards someone, some resentment towards something, some kind of unresolved stuff towards something that's happened in the past. And this bitterness, you can get away with it, but the cost of holding it down and not letting it come out in meditation, by the way, it again makes your mind moving. It makes the mind moving. It makes the mind restless. And it's not easy to think and contemplate and concentrate with a restless mind. So this means that inner cleanliness means bringing my attention to what are those recurring processes that come to my mind, and those are the processes to look into. Because a process that comes and goes, this is fine. We all have processes coming and going. But it's those recurring themes that come and go, those are the ones that are saying, look into me and release me. Give me some attention and release me. So never mind the coming and goings of random events like renovation of houses, but the recurring events, those are the ones to look into and release in meditation, as we will see. How? Stairiam. This is translated as steadfastness, but also commitment or dedication. Now, any prominent, respectful school like physics, it takes you how long to do a physics or medical degree? 10 years. Maybe physics is less, but medical degree, 10 years. That means you got 10 years of patience, 10 years of dedication to stick by, knowing it's going to take that long to master the degree. Now, it's really funny when it comes to metaphysics, when it comes to philosophy, when it comes to Vedanta, when it comes to just generally getting to know yourself. It's a quick pill kind of thinking. Why is this? I don't know. But that is not how it is. It is hard work, just like the medical degree. I said a couple of sessions ago, every 10 years, every 5 years, plus minus, is when you have those real changes show up from 5 years ago. So this means it's consistent and never-ending work. In Japan, we call it Kaizen. Kaizen means constant and never-ending growth. That means every day finding something little and saying, what little can I do today to become better? What little can I release? What little can I do to connect to the presence of Ishvara? So therefore, the person is involved, and they're involved because learning is not linear. Sometimes you listen to 5 sessions, no progress. And then on the 6th session, progress. And then a 7th session, a little bit. Learning is not linear. It's not like this. It's basically like this, and then like that, and then like down, and then like that. That's learning. But there is an incline, a very slow incline. So for this reason, it makes no sense to listen one time. It's a long-term relationship. And how does one develop a long-term relationship? By knowing the benefits. What makes you not commit? What makes you not commit? I heard once when I was 17, and this changed my life. What makes a person continue a trajectory of something that is hard and important? That path is called shreyaha, something that is important, but it's hard to do. And what is it, that one that sticks to the easy path, preyaha, that is easy, quick, gives instant gratification? What's the difference? The one who doesn't stick to what needs to be done, they think about the process. Oh, I need to wake up. Oh, I need to put my shoes on. And then I need to open the door. And then I need to come down the stairs. And then I need to take my first jog step. And then I need to go uphill. They're thinking about the process. And therefore, they give up. If you think about the process, commitment becomes very hard. The other person who's able to commit and jog and exercise morning after morning, what is their thought process? They're thinking about the advantage. What is the benefit of doing this? How better will I be by doing this? How much more healthy will I be as a result of this? How much more energy will I have by doing this process? So their focus is on the benefit. And that's what causes persistence, in other words, dedication and commitment. Therefore, process, I stop. Benefit, I most likely, not always, but most likely, I will continue this trajectory. So in other words, the eye is always on, what's the benefit here? What's the advantage? In other words, tying it to you deeply. And therefore, it pushes you, it gives you the energy to go forward. Okay, and then Atma Vinigraha, which just means self-mastery. So everything we just covered basically is self-mastery. Okay, and now you want to know, well, what is the benefit? What's the outcome of this self-mastery? So this karma yogi who's exercising these qualities, what is it that what is it that they enjoy? Verse 7, Jitat manaf prashantasya paramatma samahitaha shitoshna sukhadukkeshu tathamana pamanayoho. What it says is the person who enjoys mastery over the mind, that one has become prashanta, in other words, cheerful. So see, we often think of a wise person as someone that's serious and they're kind of, equanimous towards everything. They don't respond to anything. But on the contrary, a wise yogi, a sophisticated yogi, is one that is, friendly. They're easygoing. They're just like, wow, kind of a cool person, right? Friendly. And so why? Because they're not driven by personal pressures. I'm supposed to look like this. I'm supposed to have this facade. I'm supposed to say this. All this nonsense has gone, how to be in this world. And that makes you very likable. For that reason, they've got no pressures. And so they're cheerful, naturally cheerful. They're not trying to be cheerful. Okay? And therefore, Paramatma Samahitaha. Why are they cheerful? Because according to these values, which are values universal that we mentioned, they are aligned to Ishvara's intelligence. The Ishvara's intelligence is manifesting as these values that we just expounded. And by aligning yourself to these values, you are aligning yourself to Ishvara. In other words, when you say bring Ishvara into your life, how do I bring intelligence into my life? By bringing the values into your life. What values? We have just talked about them, right? Ahimsa, for example, accommodation. In other words, right? So this is bringing dharma into my life, but dharma is a manifestation of Ishvara. So when I say bring God into your life, what do you really mean by that? How do I bring God into my life? You follow the laws which are there for your benefit. Okay? And there's a nice, in chapter 7, verse 7, there's an example of beads strung around a thread. And it's an analogy that shows you this thread is this invisible intelligence that connects all of us together in a form of different laws that we don't see. psychological laws, physiological laws, chemical laws, electromagnetic laws, gravity laws, thermonuclear laws, all sorts of laws in the universe that hold all things together. Now, these laws and the forms that we see, both of them are the beads. Okay? Both of them are the beads. And Ishvara is that which connects the laws and the forms together. And not only is it that which connects, but Ishvara is also the forms and the laws. So Ishvara is not only holding the forms and the laws together, but the forms and the laws are Ishvara. So this analogy helps you to see that I don't see Ishvara. Where do I see Ishvara? Because Ishvara is the cause. I cannot see the cause. But what do I see? I see the effects. And what kind of effects do I see? Forms. And I see or I observe those laws, those forms interacting with each other in a unique way, in an intelligent way. For example, right, digestion laws, physiology laws. You have a little cut on your skin. What happens? Immediately, physiological laws say, aha, we need to form we need to repair this. This is Ishvara's doing. Okay, so in other words, what we're saying is Ishvara is constantly, as the intelligence, rearranging itself. Intelligence is constantly rearranging itself to maintain, to create and sustain the laws and the forms. The forms in which or by which are functioning by the help of the laws. Okay? So what is Ishvara? Laws and forms working together. Not only now, but in the past, present, and future. Mana apamana yoho. So often this is translated as equanimity in honor and dishonor, right? What do you mean equanimity in honor and dishonor? Well, it's more like equanimity in mental afflictions, because when someone shows you respect or someone disrespects you, so that can disturb you. So the person enjoys a certain level of mental stability in reference to the world's honoring you and dishonoring you. And look at this. This is very interesting. Ishvara has made it in such a way that no matter who comes to earth will have a fair share of afflictions, suffering, pain. In other words, there is not one person that can be born on earth who will be free of suffering. Even avatars were not free of suffering. Look at Rama. Rama's wife got kidnapped. He was a king in Ayodhya, and he had to retreat into the forest, exile to the forest with Sita. Imagine that. You have the position of a king, and next day you go to the forest. Is that pleasant? That's affliction, that's suffering. And then his wife gets kidnapped. Imagine that, your wife gets kidnapped, or your husband gets kidnapped. Would you feel at ease? Knowing what can happen to them, what's being done to them right now? By the mafia. You see? So Rama, even he, as an avatar, Lord incarnate, had to go through significant amount of concern and anxiety. And then Krishna, he's born with his uncle Kansa wanted to kill him. Before you're born, there's someone just waiting for you to get born, just waiting there. Come on, get born, I want to kill you. Right? What a life. And then he gets born in a dungeon. Where were you born? In a clean sanitary hospital. He gets born underground in a dark dungeon. And then he goes to foster parents, not his original parents. And then when he grows up, people don't like him because he's very intelligent and smart. Is that a pleasant life? And Krishna did not lose it. He was completely composed. Why? Is it because he didn't have any problems? No, because his knowledge was strong. he was well established in the knowledge that the way life is made is that whoever gets born will go through those 4 conditions. Get exactly what I want, opposite, less or more. And even if you are intelligent and you are like Krishna, other people still have to appreciate you, but most will not. That is why you can be very educated, very careful about what you do. And yet, the person, if they're not at your level, they won't see you. And thereby, Duryodhan didn't see Krishna. No matter what he did, he saw him as just another kind of a magician, some strange guy. So this means that how can you expect a person to really see you when most are not even at your level? That means they have to be at your advanced, at your level where you're at. They have to have done the work in life. And not many are willing to do that, to even recognize your what you want, what you stand for, what is important to you. But the truth is, most want, not even family. I go to my parents, I'm just a kid, a son. What do you do? How's business? I stopped there 10 years ago, mom and dad. Still today, how's business? Oh, it's good. In other words, and sometimes you kind of I wish they saw me for, what this new person is now. It's totally changed. There's no connection to business anymore. So same thing with you in your life. You will be, as you are now, just to show up here, you've done work. It's pretty obvious. But the other person will not see that. And therefore, I need to have accommodation to accommodate that. Because if I don't have accommodation, I allow that to become my own problem. And that is not a wise yogi. Because a wise yogi knows 4 possibilities are most likely possible. Therefore, even avatars, if they cannot get recognized for who they are, they get disrespected, and they're supposed to be Lord incarnate. A lot of knowledge, a lot of charm, a lot of sophistication. And they cannot get loved by everyone. And they cannot go through a smooth ride. Then is it fair to think you're supposed to go through a smooth ride? Right? Everyone's supposed to go through a smooth ride? It's just not realistic to think like that. That's how Earth is set up. Anyone who gets born on Earth comes with punyam and papam. That means I come with a fair share of things that will become pleasant in my life, but equal 50% things that will be not so pleasant. That is just the truth, at least here on earth. In Swargaloka, in heaven, it's different. If you go there, you have a good time. But on earth, in this planet, that is the way how it is, which is also advantageous because it gives you a chance to look into your deeper stuff, into your unresolved stuff. You go to heaven, it's just enjoyment. There's no thinking about a larger picture of life. So earth gives you a great chance to look into the the purpose of life. So it is a privilege to be here. Okay, and Shita Ushna, which is basically just equanimity towards physical afflictions, because Shita means heat and Ushna, heat and cold, right? Equanimity towards heat and cold. So again, right, if you go through small discomforts and they bother us, then life becomes very kind of hard to go through because I don't have the right chair, it's a little bit of pain. So the person has to understand, hey, this is fine. I can pull through this. In other words, they're not so ruffled by pains here and there. Verse 8. Jnana vijnana triptatma kultastho vijitendriyaha yukta idyuchyate yogi samaloshta makanchanaha. So jnana or jnana, but jnana vijnana tripta atma. So this karma yogi that we speak of, or the true sannyasi, they are tripta. Tripta means they're satisfied. Why are they satisfied? Because they have firm knowledge about this, what we're doing. They've thought about it a long time, and therefore now it is firm. And kutastaha vijitendriyaha. Their senses, their thought processes are relatively well mastered, What this means is that they don't allow their senses just to fly left and right. If there's a TV show, for example, yeah, it's there, it's nearby, but do I have to watch it? That's your choice. In other words, they've mastered and they see, where do I want to expose my ears and eyes to? Samaloshta ashma kanchanaha. This person is the same with a lump of gold, earth, and stone. Huh. What do you mean by this? Does this mean that they can't distinguish between the three? There's a joke, actually. There's a scientist, I guess, who came back from the lab, and he discovered now that gold and earth and stone, they're all just atoms anyway. And it was anniversary, so he thought he'd give something to his wife. And he thought the gold is too much money. So he just brought her, a little stone. And she says, "What's this?" "It's a stone for our anniversary." "Well, what am I going to do with the stone? This is dirty." "Yeah, but I want gold." "Yeah, but gold is also just atoms. The whole thing is atoms." You see? So he can do this, but in real life transaction, it's not that simple. You still deliver the right thing. So she can distinguish between the three, but at the same time, they know there's a difference. But the yogi also know where's the sameness. Where's the sameness between the earth, the rock, and the gold? In a substrate. Okay, one back before that. Concept, good. In other words, the stone, rock, and gold, they all reduce into concepts. So this means I can keep the differences and I can deal with the differences the way they're meant to be dealt with. But a yogi also understands where is the commonality in all of them. So in this sense, they don't stay away from forms. Forms are not here to hurt you. Why are you going to stay away from concepts? They're all concepts after all. Nevertheless, it's in other words, you don't create this space between form and concept, because a form is concept. That means I don't have to stay away from forms. Okay? Therefore, the yogi enjoys differences, but they also recognize the sameness. So you don't have to collapse the world into one big clump of consciousness, by the way. Differences are differences. Sameness is sameness. And they don't contradict each other. We've seen how in Kena Upanishad. Okay, and then what kind of person is capable of meditating? Verse 9. Suhran mitrar yudasina madhyasthad veshya bandhushu sadhushvapi cha papeshu samabuddhir vishishyate. See, in verse 9, it's very easy to love those who we are close with and get along with those who we are close with. But where it becomes harder is those who you don't get along with so much for whatever reason. And what happens is this can add up into grudges, a different kind of resentments and bitterness in the mind. So if I have all of these figures that I get triggered by, then you think, oh, it's fine, I get triggered once in a while, I'll just stay away from them. But it's very hard to do that because you're always around people. And every time we get triggered, they add up in our mind as resentments and grudges. And that can, again, pull you down a little bit. So the yogi enjoys equanimity in reference to 4 kinds of characters that come into your life. And what are they? Friend. Now, what kind of friend? What is a friend? Well, a friend has gradations. Because sometimes when a friend, suppose one friend comes to another and says, oh, I just broke up. Oh, I broke up. It's terrible. And the other friend says, get over it. You'll find someone better. Wasn't the right thing for you. So it's dismissive, right? But there's another kind of friend who will listen and will give a different kind of suggestion. Okay? So there's gradations of friends. We're not saying which one, but there is, every friend is there, a friend. But the yogi has equanimity because, they understand everyone's got personalities. And then suhrat. This is someone who's more evolved than just a friend. They have this, this dutiful ethic about them. For example, they can be a friend and they don't want much from you. They just want to show up. They enjoy their time. They do what is to be done and leave. Or suhrat can also be the one who stops over and fixes your car tire. Right? You say, wow, what a kind person. And you thanking them, thank you. And they're like, no, don't worry about it. For them, it's just a duty. It is to be done. It's got nothing to do with me. It's the right thing to do. They're not even, not even going to think about it, and goes on their way. This is a suhrat. This is a slightly more evolved mind. And then we have Ari. Ari is an enemy. Now, who is an enemy? Well, there are different kinds of enemies. Someone who disagrees with you could be an enemy, like disagrees everything you say. It could be someone that you're not getting along with. Someone that wants to hurt you or defame you or physically damage your property. And these ones become harder to deal with because they can kind of really get, underneath your skin. And it's, very hard to have equanimity towards these. However, the thing about this is not to generalize, because when you color the person and you put a label onto them, you don't help yourself. You make it just more intense in your own mind. So the first thing to take note is, am I generalizing, and to what extent am I generalizing this individual? How much more of a monster am I making them in my mind? So rather than turn him into a monster, one could instead look at the facts. What exactly are they, specifically doing that I don't agree with? So one has to get specific. The less specific, we tend to get more generalized. And the more generalized, we start to include more essence of the person, right? Suppose they just, like on the road, they just do something dangerous, and then you generalize. This person means they're a dangerous person to be with. Okay? In other words, we need to get specific. What is it specifically that has triggered me or that I don't like? And that way you keep perspective. That way you keep with vyavaharika. If I don't do that, I go back into pratibhasika. Okay? And what if someone is trying to actively hurt you? This is even more challenging. And I thought about this and I didn't know what to do. About like, how do I even answer this question? But my own teacher suggested something, and I feel it's just a wonderful answer. And she says, if someone is actively trying to hurt you and there's nothing you can do about it, she said, pray for them. Pray for them. Why? Because they're doing what they're doing helplessly out of their own confusion. They can't help themselves. When you pray for them, you increase the chance of them coming back to their senses. Because when you pray, you actually affect the other person, especially when they're directly connected or directly, influencing you. And I thought, wow, so I can pray for those who are actively trying to hurt me. What do I say during a prayer? Well, may Lord give them the knowledge, the right conduct, so they can wake up and recognize that what they're doing is unfair, what they're doing is hurtful, and it's hurting them. May they gain the clarity that what they're doing is hurting them. And I thought that was a wonderful way to deal with this, because it's converting your helplessness into some action. Okay? And the other thing about an enemy is not to take it personally. And the reason why is because, as I said, first of all, in the first session, everyone is guided generally by four, right, forces. And The first one is impressions. So we're carrying over impressions from the past. Impressions of, for example, you've got an analytical mind. And not only do you have an analytical mind, but you're carrying an impression for, or a preference for certain kind of minds. So if your mind is slow and it needs to think slowly, and someone's annoyed with you, then that could be because of their impression to think fast. So this means I have to, right, accommodate that kind of personality. I can't take it personally because they just think fast. Another reason or another factor that can influence is as I said, limited information. Limited information, everyone is under the spell of, and by ignoring the fact that this person doesn't have all the facts, then you can take it on personally. But if I bring the fact that this person doesn't know all the facts, then I understand where they're coming from. You understand? In other words, I gain more understanding that this person is helplessly doing this because they don't have the full picture of my situation or my, whatever, my child or my spouse or my business or whatever it is. And then you come to see, wow, and I can also make the same mistake towards other people. I can act out of my own ignorance about them and I can hurt them unintentionally, and yet I'm totally convinced that I'm doing the right thing. Okay? The other factor is environment. Environment plays a huge part of why people do what they do. And, like, for example, there's this kind of a mob mentality. I read the book called People and Situations, and it was studying all sorts of psychology, why people do the most unusual things when normally they would have never done that if they were by themselves. And one of the things they say is a mob mentality. When people come together, especially at sports matches, then one individual could be a good guy. But when they come together on their kind of a same team and they all, we want our team to win, they get certain kind of an aggression. And this aggression can cause them to act irrationally. And then after they act out irrationally, they say, oh, I would have never done this on my own. And then you look at this person and say, this guy is a total, irrational person. But you're only judging that on the basis of context. That's not how they are all the time. Same thing in any situation. Your close loved one may act irrationally, or even you may act irrationally in a certain environment. But on a different kind of environment, you would have never acted like that. Environment plays a huge impact on why people act the way they act. And if I take this out, then if someone does something inappropriate in one environment, it's very easy to generalize that's how that person is. And yet, it's probably the first time they've ever done it for the last 10 years. And then we have aversions and attractions. Everyone comes with certain hatred or just displeasure. I don't like that. I just don't. It's just not my thing. It's just not my thing what you're talking about now. And others have, I just innocently feel pulled towards this. So we all have this innocent, helpless magnetism towards something, and kind of a conscious, mindful, and sometimes not so mindful. It's not for me, just not for me. This is not for me. Okay, we call this likes and dislikes. And everyone is under the spell of likes and dislikes, more or less. And thereby, you will also be under the spotlight of somebody else's likes and dislikes. For this reason, it is not, I should not take it so personally.
Andre, the likes and dislikes, you said it's personal, it's bound to your personality, but are you born with it? That you have, is it in the mind? Is it that you take with maybe through reincarnation, or that you are born with likes and dislikes because it's different for everyone?
you both carry over some impressions. For example, you carry over an impression for having a mechanical mind. Okay? Now, if you have, and some people get born with an artistic mind. So the one who gets born with an artistic mind, that's going to convert as a dislike when they're exposed to mechanical things. And the one with a mechanical mind they're born with, when you show them artistic things, that's going to naturally trigger a dislike for artistic things. So it can be a contributing factor, carry over these impressions, but mostly they're also formed in this life.
Okay, so the mind is not the same for everyone on the moment that you are born.
Of course, it's different for everyone because you're a product of many causes and many experiences, and in fact, this life. Let's just take this life, right? We're all different, and now suppose we all die, then how many of us get born next life? We're going to be all different again.
So what we have learned earlier, that you have your brain and you have your mind, it's colored by different lives or different experience. So it's for everyone.
Good. So for example, I'll give you a tangible example. So suppose you're born with empathy, right? You want to give, and you care about other people's, pleasure and their delights. And you just keep on giving. So you came with that impression to give. And you keep on giving, but it overrides your own ability to say, what do I need here? So the person keeps forgetting their own needs. And eventually they form an aversion towards giving because it gave them so much pain. So therefore now you're born with a good impression of a liking for giving, and in this life you've also now developed a dislike for giving, and that takes over into the next life. So again, it's just a constant mixture of both this life and carryover. Okay, and then Madhyastha, so Ari, that's enemy, and then Madhyastha is mediator, an arbitrator. Now this is very interesting because sometimes if you're in a dispute with somebody else, suppose the mediator or the judge makes a favor against you. For example, there's a divorce and they say, they will have the kids and you're not going to have the kids. And what it's saying is that I have no right to, it's up to you, but a mediator one just make the decision based on the facts. Now, what it's saying here, a yogi doesn't have kind of a disturbed mind about that because it could have gone any way. And there's a nice story in the scriptures where Mandana Mishra from Purva Mimamsa, where you do rituals to go to heaven, and he was having it on the banks of Varanasi. Discussions with Adi Shankar. And Adi Shankar said that the purpose of life is to reconcile your relationship, to understand your oneness with Ishvara. And Mandana Mishra said the purpose of life is to do good deeds and go to heaven, right? To do a lot of rituals and go to heaven. And they said, let's have a debate, but our mediator will be my wife, Mandana Mishra's wife, Ubhaya Bharati. And she was a very smart woman. So she said, okay, I'm just going to watch and I'm going to let myself be convinced who is more persuasive here. I'm just going to be equanimous towards both. If Mandana Mishra, my husband loses, then he will have to divorce me and he would have to take on sannyas, the ochre robe. If Adi Shankara loses, he would have to give up his sannyas and get married. So the stakes are huge, right? And now they began discussing, and the debates went on for days. And she was just listening, and both of them were, reasonable and providing the best of they could because they know the stakes are so high, and there's no way I'm going to get kind of married, and I'm not going to divorce my wife. And end of the discussion, she said, "Okay, I've heard enough. I have to say that Adi Shankara is more convincing. She is the wife of a husband. Now, do you think the husband, Mandana Mishra, was angry towards her? No. Not only did she have so much objectivity about what is to be done, that she didn't allow her feelings to be attached to her husband and biased towards him. She just says, I'm going to objectively listen to the facts. This is not about me, about my husband or Adi Shankara. This is about what makes sense. And she said, Adi Shankara makes sense. Therefore, Mandana Mishra divorced her. And he didn't have any resentment towards the judge. Yeah, so this is objectivity, but also an equanimous mind. So you can see, even if they're from a different school, how sophisticated a yogi's mind is to be able to go through this kind of experience. Okay, so the next verse will ask who enjoys a relatively quiet mind and who is able to meditate without struggle. Okay, so we're kind of talking about that already, so the next verse will expand upon that. So verse 10, Yogi yunjita satatam atmanam rahasi stitaha ekaki yatachit atma nirashira parigrahaha. All of these prior attitudes have contributed to a relatively mature mind. And that kind of mind is now almost ready for meditation. However, there are a few more things that this person, yogi, has that makes them very ready for meditation. And what is that? Well, they're free from longing and possessions. What does this mean? They're free from longing and possessions? Well, I mean, without desires, you're born with three powers: Kriya Shakti, Icha Shakti, Jnana Shakti. You're born to desire. You cannot get rid of your desires. Maybe if we add one more word, free of desires which are not keeping in line with what is it that I want in life. In other words, those desires that are robbing me of my time in reference to what I'm seeking, which is called binding desires. So, good answer. Okay. So therefore, in other words, no object preoccupies the mind for too long. Objects are objects. Girlfriend, boyfriend, son, daughter, grandfather, grandpa, grandma, wife, husband is just that. It is, a wonderful thing to have, but at the same time, it doesn't preoccupy the mind of the individual. And I understand, because I do visit a lot of families, and it's, I hardly see this sort of, it's very hard to see where the husband and wife can enjoy their own independence. Usually they're like this. Wherever the husband goes, the wife is there. Wherever the wife goes, come over with me, husband. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but have you lost, your individuality is also there. So this is also relatively important. Okay? And thus, yogi yunjita satatam atmanam rahasi stitaha. So, it's very simple. So, remaining alone in a quiet place, what happens? I connect my mind to the object of meditation. So now we're going into what is meditation. Remaining alone in a quiet place. Okay, this much I know. But then the next part, connecting my mind. So now we know it is in reference to the mind. So I will use my mind in meditation to the object of meditation. What is the object of meditation? And in classical, normal meditation, we think thoughtlessness. And yet Vedanta has a totally different definition of meditation. And Vedanta's definition is Saguna Brahma Vishaya. In other words, Saguna Brahma is Ishvara, that means Brahman with attributes, which is Ishvara, that means intelligence. Saguna Brahma Vishaya, Vishaya means subject matter. Manasa Vyaparaha. In other words, what does the mind, Vyaparaha, what does the mind do in reference to meditation? the mind does or thinks about the subject matter related to Saguna Brahma. Oh, what could this mean? We will see this next time. Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.